Hey, Bible study friends. We are in our fourth night of our study on 66 books in 66 days. And tonight we're going to be doing an overview of the book of Numbers. And we're going to do this a little bit differently tonight, as I'm going to record the overview, post it early, and then come back tonight for an opportunity for us, after we watch the video, to have a conversation and questions and answers. I want to try this tonight because I think it'll be good for us to have the overview ahead of time so that we have plenty of time to say, well, hey, Pastor Kim, what about this? How do we answer this question? And then we'll be able to have enough time, hopefully, clicking in the feed, asking questions. And I will also, before we close out of this, pose a few questions ahead of time. So I want to give you just a quick overview of the book of Numbers and then ask a few questions. I will post it, and then I will also post our Bible video on Numbers so that you can view that too, and then maybe it'll help the conversation flow a little bit better tonight. If we look at the vital statistics, as we have been doing for the other books of the book of Numbers, we find that the book of Numbers is written for the purpose to tell the story of how Israel prepared to enter the promised land. Written by Moses around 1450 to 1410 in the desert during Israel's wanderings. The key verse that comes out of Numbers kind of tells about the anger that God had over the people and why they entered into a 40-year period of wandering. It says in verse 22 of Numbers 14, "Not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it." And so God, in his anger, is saying, boy, you guys have been disobedient. Because you have been disobedient, you're not going to see the promised land. You're not going to receive the promise. Your offspring will, but you're going to wander in the desert as we prepare a people, as we raise a people up who are going to trust me, live obedient to me, and follow my ways. And so the key people that are in the book of Numbers continue to be Moses and his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. Joshua begins to show up, and Caleb, the importance of Joshua and Caleb, as well as Korah and Balaam. So we find ourselves around Mount Sinai, having views of the promised land, the land of Canaan, and the wandering in the plains of Moab. And so the book of Numbers is broken out into 4 specific sections. There's chapter 1 through chapter 10, the first part of chapter 10, that talks about the preparing for the journey. As part of their preparing, the Lord gives strict guidelines to the Israelites regarding the purity in the camp. He wanted them to have a lifestyle distinct from the nations around them, and he wanted them to be a holy people. This flows out of what we talked about last night, where God spoke several times, "Be holy because I am holy." And so he wanted them to be a holy people, which reminds us that we too are a holy people. And so in this first section, preparing for the journey, chapter 1 through chapter 10, the first census of the nation is taken. We learn more about the role of the Levites. We learn about how they are to keep purity in the camp and how they receive guidance for the journey ahead of them. The second section, from the middle part of chapter 10 into chapter 14, is the first approach to the promised land. There's a lot of complaining that the people do. Miriam and Aaron oppose Moses, and the spies that cross over into the promised land incite a rebellion. The Israelites were prevented from entering the promised land because of their unbelief, their distrust of God. And we find that's true throughout history. God's people continue to struggle with a lack of faith. God sends, through Moses, sends 12 spies over into the promised land to kind of see it beforehand. And 10 of those spies come back and give a negative report. Only two of those spies, Caleb and Joshua, give a positive report. But because there's 10 that came back with a negative report, it incites a little bit of rebellion, and people begin to distrust Moses and God is not very happy about that. And so the third section of this, chapters 15 through chapter 21, is the wandering in the desert. There's additional regulations that are put on the Israelites. Many of the leaders that are under Moses begin to rebel against Moses. We have more description of the duties and the priests and the Levites, and it starts talking about a new generation being raised up. You see, when the people complained against God and criticized Moses, they were severely punished, and a lot of the community, the nation of Israel, was killed because of their disobedience. It was a result of Korah's rebellion. You may have heard in the past about Korah's rebellion. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram and their household rebelled against God, rebelled against Moses, and their households died off along with 250 false priests that showed up. There was dissatisfaction and discontent. There was grumbling among the nation, and God had to let those people die off so a new generation would rise up. And we learn about that when we read Numbers 15 through 21. The last section of Numbers is chapters 22 through 36, which is the second approach to the promised land. There's the story of Balaam. There's the second census that was taken, instructions on concerning the offerings, and the time that the Israelites were camped on the plains of Moab. The Moabites and the Midianites were people that were against Israel, and they tried to get Balaam to curse Israel, but he wouldn't do it. And there's a long story there. There's a very kind of humorous story about a talking donkey. I would love for you, as one of our questions, to find what chapter, what book of the Bible talks about a talking donkey and the significance of that. That's one of the questions I would love for us to raise up. But the themes that come out of the book of Numbers are the census, the census that was taken twice, really in the first part of the book of Numbers, and then the last part of the book of Numbers, the rebellion and everything that revolved around the rebellion against God, the wandering in the desert and why they wandered for so long. Because they rebelled, the Israelites wandered for 40 years. And we struggle when we have to do some kind of fasting and wandering for 40 days. They had 40 years, and a lot of them died off for the new generation to rise up. And also the theme of Canaan rises up. Canaan, the promised land. It was the land that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. the land of the covenant, and the importance of that land, and how that land would be received by the 12 tribes of Israel. We find early in the book of Numbers the arrangement of the tribes and the arrangement of the tribes around the tabernacle, how they set camp, and the tabernacle would be in the middle of the camp, and the 12 tribes of Israel would be on the outer sides of that, and the sons of Aaron and the sons of Levi, who were in charge of the tabernacle, would be on the inner circle of that camp, and on the outside of that camp would be the 12 tribes of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, coming out of that: Benjamin and Ephraim and Manasseh, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, Issachar, Judah, Zebulun, Simeon, Reuben, and Gad, those 12 tribes that were there. And so the importance of those tribes, and the importance of Canaan, the promised land, and how God was still preparing a people, preparing them in their time in the desert to be willing, be obedient, to cross over into the promised land. And so if we were to ask a handful of questions about the book of Numbers, one of them I think for us would be who is Caleb and who is Joshua? Why are they important in the book of Numbers and going forward into the crossing over into the promised land? We can also learn about them more when we get to the book of Deuteronomy and the book of Joshua. So who are Caleb and Joshua? Why did God order a census to be taken in the book of Numbers? We'll talk about that tonight. What is the difference between ceremonial law, moral law, and the judicial law? I think that's important as we go through Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers to talk about the difference of those laws. So we'll talk about that tonight too. Also, something that comes out of the book of Numbers that I think is important to us, coming out of Numbers chapter 6, is the Aaronic blessing. Aaron being the brother of Moses and being the first priest. What is that blessing? The Aaron blessing, which is Aaronic, Aaronic. What is the Aaronic blessing? We'll talk about that tonight. And so if you'll kind of do a pre-study following the overview, we'll have some really good Q&A tonight, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna ready this video, post it for you, post a link to our YouTube video that talks specifically about the overview of Numbers. And then when we meet together tonight at 8 o'clock, we will have a lot of this already studied and readied. And I think we're going to have a different kind of study tonight that'll help us do some conversation. That's what I'm looking forward to tonight. I will see you in a little bit. Have fun studying. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.